Jam into one-of-a-kind collection of sports apparel and accessories. Shirts, shoes, caps, bags, and more. Whatever you plan, make it WB Sport. True athletic gear.
Hi again, everybody. I'm Pat O'Brien, and welcome once again to Basketball All-Stars. His older brothers were heroes on the football field, so he chose to make his name on the basketball court. He was drafted by the Detroit Pistons as a backup to three of the league's most talented guards, but by the middle of his rookie season, he was a starter. We present the second of two parts in the life of Joe Dumars. In 1986, the Atlanta Hawks handed the Detroit Pistons a tough first-round playoff loss. When Joe Dumars suited up for his second NBA season, Detroit was focused on breaking past Atlanta. The Hawks finished first in the Central Division that year, with the Pistons 5 games behind in second place. Then came the playoffs.
We won the first-round series, and we got into the second round against the Atlanta Hawks. And at that time, at that particular time, Pistons and the Atlanta Hawks were a very even team. And one of those teams were going to ascend to greater heights, and one would descend.
In a tough physical series, the Pistons avenged their 1986 loss and took the 1987 semifinals in 5 games. For Joe Dumars in Detroit, it was a turning point.
We did win a couple of games by maybe 1 or 2 points. But I honestly think that that was the difference in us going on to winning the World Championships and that team not going on to win any World Championships.
In the Eastern Conference Championships, Detroit faced the defending champions, the Boston Celtics.
Boston was always amazing. If it was springtime and hot and humid, you could rest assured that the heat would be on in the locker room until we got someone to cut it off. Or in the wintertime when it was cold out, I remember so many times it's, below freezing, snowing, and we walk in the locker room and the windows are cracked open. And even when you shut the windows, it takes an hour for it to warm up in there. And that hour is the time that you're getting in the locker room, getting dressed, getting ready to play.
The Celtics, of course, had dominated the Eastern Conference for years, but the upstart Pistons pushed the series to a 7th game. It was played on a hot, humid day in Boston Garden.
And I started thinking about just growing up, watching all of these games, watching Boston and Philly and Boston and New York and all those different teams play when I grew up, and I was thinking, I can't believe I'm in one of these games now.
The Celtics and the Pistons slugged it out, and Joe put up 35 points, but Boston wound up winning the game by 3 points. In 15 postseason contests, Joe Dumars had averaged 13 points and 5 rebounds.
I think that they expected to win, and we were just happy to be there. After that, though, I think we realized that happy to be here is not going to get it. Because we lost to Boston in 7 games, then they became our measuring stick. That team was so used to winning. That team was so much expected to win. They felt like it was their almost birthright that they were supposed to win and be in the NBA Finals.
The Pistons won 54 games in 1988, and their physical style of play earned them the nickname, the Bad Boys of Basketball.
I can speak very candidly and say that night in and night out, we wanted to come out and physically intimidate you. We wanted to come out and physically pound you pretty good, and we wanted you to think about that before the game.
When you walk into the building, it's like, ooh, here come the Pistons, here come the bad boys. It was like, when you stepped on the scene, it was like, ooh, there they is.
Detroit players like Bill Lambier, Dennis Rodman, and Rick Mahorn gained a reputation for hard fouls and sometimes cheap shots. But Joe Dumars was a bad boy in name only.
None of the guys tried to force that role of, you know, we're the bad boys, we're the tough bad guys, and you have to be also. They knew how tough I was, but I just didn't have to kind of play that black hat role.
Joe averaged over 14 points a game and finished third on the team in scoring as Detroit won 54 games and its division. In the playoffs, there was only one thing on the bad boys' minds: the Celtics.
It's time for these guys to step aside. We're going to the NBA Finals, and they're just a stepping stone in our way.
The Pistons were hard, tough, physical, and outlasted the Celtics to take the series 4-2. It was a bitter defeat for the East Premier team.
They were the old guard. We were the new guard coming in. They didn't want to give an inch. We didn't care about giving an inch. And the game was over with. They went to their locker room and we went to ours, and really was no big deal to us.
His third year in the NBA, Joe Dumars was playing against the Los Angeles Lakers in the NBA Finals.
And lo and behold, we won the first game of the series. And I think only then that we started realizing that we're in the NBA Finals and have a chance to win the World Championship. But before that, leading up to that, I think we were just happy to be there.
The finals became a contest between the physical defense of the bad boy Pistons and the fast break offense of the Showtime Lakers.
We got into the LA series really quick and developed a rivalry with the Lakers real quick, simply because of what we had gone through with Boston. And we brought the same attitude to Los Angeles.
Detroit pushed the series to 7 games, but they lost the final contest by only 3 points.
I can honestly say that after we lost to the Lakers in Game 7 of the finals, in the locker room, at the Forum in LA, immediately after the game, the first thing we all looked around and looked at each other and said was, we're going to win the World Championship next year. Oh well, we got to play the regular season. We have to play these 82 games, and oh well, we're going to have to play the first, second, and third round of the playoffs. But I guess we have to do all that if we're going to win the World Championship.
In a game against the New York Knicks in January of 1989, Joe Dumars broke his hand. It required surgery.
I think I ended up missing 17 days or 21 days or something. I just had an incredible will not to allow a hand injury to keep me out. I basically felt if I can get out here and run and jump and guard someone, then I can play.
Joe not only played, he helped the Pistons to 63 victories in 1989, the best record in the league. An offensive threat, he put up 42 points in an April game against Cleveland. He was also named to the NBA All-Defensive Team.
Every single night you knew you went out there, you knew that there were guys out there trying to prove a point to you, that they're going to be more physical than you, they had more manhood than you, they were tougher than you. And that's what happens when you are tagged as the bad boys.
Going into the playoffs, the Pistons were focused on beating the Lakers, but the Chicago Bulls were focused on beating the Pistons. The two teams collided in the Eastern Conference Finals, where the job of containing Bulls superstar Michael Jordan rested heavily on guess who? Joe.
A big plus for me in dealing with Michael and in Chicago at that time was I knew, and he knew, that even if he got by me, there were some very physical guys on my team waiting for him to come in that lane. And matter of fact, they kind of wanted me to invite him to come in the lane a lot of times. Like, let him get in the lane, Joe. Just let him, like, I don't want to let him beat me. And they're like, no, let him get in there. Let him get in the lane and beat you. And, you know, those guys wanted to be physical with him every chance they got.
The Pistons beat the Bulls in 6 tough games to return to the NBA Finals, where they again faced the Lakers. Detroit took the first 2 games from LA, and in Game 3, Joe Dumars caught fire.
I remember saying, I don't care what place you got, just for giving me the ball.
Joe put up 31 points as the Pistons won 114 to 110. Now to Game 4, Los Angeles ran up an early 16-point lead, but Detroit stormed back to win the game and their first NBA title.
So we swept them, and I think that there was no question after that we were the team in the East. We were the team basically in the NBA at that time. We had just won a world championship the year before, and we came back and swept Boston the year afterwards. You know, I think we were at our height then.
He had averaged over 27 points a game in the championship series. Once belittled for not playing football, Joe Dumars now is named Most Valuable Player of the NBA Finals.
You start thinking back when I made this decision just to play basketball, thinking about what the teachers and principals and coaches were saying. Are you crazy? What are you doing? You think back about all those decisions that you made to get to this point. And that's what I did. I started thinking back to all the decisions and things I had to do to get to that point. And I think that's what made it so gratifying.
After winning the NBA title in 1989, Joe Dumars gave his championship ring to Dad.
He was very ill at the time, number one, and number two, my father was that guy, like I said, that instilled that discipline, that work ethic. Without what he instilled and my mother, what they both instilled. But without what my father instilled, I just don't think I would have been standing there, you know, accepting the Most Valuable Player trophy and winning a world championship.
Champions at last, the Bad Boys terrorized the NBA in 1990.
After we had won it and proven that we were the best in the world, there was an intimidation factor. There were situations where we'd come out in the first 10 minutes of the game, be extremely physical, maybe a little fight break out, something like that, and that other team was through. They were through. I mean, we ended up winning by 20 points.
The first two games of the 1990 NBA Finals were played in Detroit. The Pistons barely recovered from an early Portland lead to take game one.
It was an impossible game. We had no business winning the first game. And then they came back and won the second game. So I think we kind of dug ourselves a little hole right there.
Now, the significance of the loss was this. Our organization, in 17 years, not just during my tenure, had never won a game in the Portland Coliseum.
Just before Game 3 began, Thomas and Coach Daly received word that Joe's father had died after a long illness. On the advice of Joe's wife, they decided not to tell him until after the game.
I really didn't think the game, as important as it was to me and the rest of the team, was as important not to tell him. But we made the decision, and I still second-guess that thought process. But I also knew, realistically, that there wasn't anything Joe could do at that moment.
In a way, it was like you were kind of being disloyal because you were holding a secret from a guy that you knew he needed to know, but you had to go out on the court and you had to perform and play with him, and watching him play and seeing the things that he was doing, but yet, right after the game, he was gonna have to go in the locker room and break his heart.
Detroit got into trouble early as the Trailblazers hit 10 of their first 12 shots. But Dumars led a Piston surge in the second half, and Detroit pulled ahead.
I'll never forget it. The shot clock was running down, and he came across and he shot one, and it had to, you know, go way, 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 way up to the sky. And, you know, the ball just kind of like gravitated and floated and looked like everything went in slow motion, you know, and it just dropped and hit the bottom of the net. And I just said to myself that, you know, his dad made that one.
The Pistons had broken their 17-year-old Portland jinx and beat the Trailblazers 121-106. Joe Dumars played his best game of the series and was Detroit's leading scorer of the night.
After the game, just walking back, once I got to the locker room, coaches and the general manager asked me to step outside and come into another room, another part of the arena. And I thought it was for an interview or something.
Just 3 minutes after leading the Pistons to their greatest upset in years, Joe Dumars learned that his father had passed away.
The owner of the team, we drove to the hotel, And he said he had a plane waiting for me. He had his jet waiting for me. He was going to fly me straight to Louisiana right after the game. This was a Sunday. We were up 2-1. Game 4 was going to be played Tuesday. Game 5 was going to be played Thursday. If we win both of those games, we win the series 4-1. If not, we have to go back to Detroit and play games 6 and 7. So I called home and I called my mom and I talked to her and I said, well, I think I'm going to catch a flight right now and come home. And she said, no, don't do that. And I said, what do you mean? She said, I'm going to schedule your father's funeral for Friday. And if you guys win Tuesday and win Thursday, you don't have to miss any games. But you got to win Tuesday or Thursday.
On Tuesday, the Pistons won by 3 points. On Thursday, they won by 2 and captured their second consecutive NBA crown.
After you win the World Championship a couple of times, you kind of get this feeling that it's yours. It's nobody else's. You kind of own it, and it's yours to do with what you want to do with. But that's not the case.
By 1991, the Detroit Pistons had been playing postseason mind games with Michael Jordan and the Chicago Bulls for 3 years.
We had a very good regular season. Things went well. We got into playoffs again, got back to the conference finals, got to the same Chicago team, but the results were different this time.
They finally got up enough courage and enough energy and mental, stamina to beat the crap out of us. So when they rose up, they're still standing.
In 1991, the Bulls eliminated the Pistons in the Eastern Conference Finals and went on to win their first championship of the 90s.
We felt like, okay, all right, we finally lost the championship. Let's regroup and let's go get it back. But when you're regrouping and trying to get it back, every time you stumble, everybody writes you off. These guys have had their day, they're through. And then what happens also is the other teams, they start to feel like you're vulnerable, and they start to feel like, you know what, I think we can get these guys now. So they come in a little bit more confident. They start playing a little bit better than they used to play when they were totally intimidated. You're not champions anymore.
In 1992, the Pistons were eliminated in the first round of the playoffs by the New York Knicks.
You lose out in the first round, then you know that the run is over with then.
In 1993, the Pistons failed to make the playoffs for the first time in Joe's career. In 1994, 4 years after reaching the top of the basketball mountain, the once mighty Pistons lost 62 games and won only 20.
20 and 62 is definitely the valley. You can't get any lower than that.
Joe had a brief respite from his woes in Detroit when he was selected for Dream Team 2.
Dream Team 2, we played the World Championships in Toronto. Some great young talent on that team.
Dumars was one of the 3 captains of a squad that included Shaquille O'Neal, Reggie Miller, and Alonzo Mourning. Playing 8 games in 11 days, Dream Team 2 easily won the gold medal.
You have people waving the United States flag. You tend to take a little bit more pride in what you're doing then. I didn't know if I believed it before. After going through Dream Team 2, I believe it now.
On a team packed with young players, Dumars stood out as a mature, seasoned leader. Meantime, back in Detroit with longtime captains Isaiah Thomas and Bill Laimbeer retired, Dumars was now asked to lead the Pistons.
When you're the youngest, growing up in your family, when you're the youngest on your team for several years, I think eventually you become a person who want to be the oldest at some point. You want to be looked at as the veteran guy or the big brother. And I welcome that because I had been on the other end of that my entire life.
As the Pistons moved to a finesse style of play, Joe Dumars adjusted his game to become Detroit's dominant outside shooter. In the third game of the 94-95 season, he matched an NBA record by scoring 10 three-pointers against the Minnesota Timberwolves.
There was no way to tell that I would have that type of game, but lo and behold, the game starts and it just happens.
And the Pistons' confusion on the court was matched by the confusion in the front office. The stability of their championship years had been replaced by a revolving door of endless trades.
I was never going to embarrass myself or the organization, but I also was thinking, I don't really need this. I'm in a position now in my life where, fortunately, I don't have to stay around here longer than I want to. And I said to myself, if this continues, if I don't see any change in this right here, I can walk away from this.
By 1996, Detroit had begun to rebuild on the strength of young players like Grant Hill, and the Pistons made it back to the playoffs.
It was a great accomplishment for us to get back, because when you're going through those real dark periods like we did for a couple of years, you start wondering if you're ever going to get back to see playoff-type basketball and that type of excitement again.
As a boy, Joe Dumars was taught never to make excuses. As an NBA player, he rarely had to. In years of glory and in years of defeat, he never failed to do what was demanded, and he did it with a professional grace that makes him a basketball all-star.
My whole thing has been, when I come here, I'm going to give you 100% every day and every night, and you can expect that from me from start to finish. And that's how I want to finish up. I want to finish up people knowing that they can always depend on me. I'd be there always.
Please join us next time as we present the first of 2 parts in the life of Akeem Olajuwon. Until then, I'm Pat O'Brien.